Yes, welcome everyone. In this YouTube video today we are going to have a continuation of information sources from where we ended last time. And as a continuation, I remember we all know where we ended, and just like we started before, I still have a simple PowerPoint presentation that we are going to take. So we ended on that, and today we are beginning from examples. So just like we said earlier, there are two major types of information source, and that is the primary that contains the first-hand information, then the secondary that contains the second-hand information that has been filtered off from the raw data which is contained in primary sources. So today we are going to look at the examples of each type of information sources, and to begin with, we are having the primary sources. Where do we get these primary sources? We have one, we have the historical documents, then two, we have the legal documents. To add on that, we also have the personal letters. These letters have first-hand information. Then we have the newspapers. Most of the things that are written on newspapers, they have evidence of the raw data that was collected from the source, and that source is what we call the primary source. So let's look at the next one, which is in our second slide, and that is none other than the secondary sources. Where do we get these secondary sources? Just like we said, after getting the information, people sit down to analyze these sources of information, and when they analyze them, they come up with books, journals, and articles. It is these books, journals, and articles that when we go and read through, you now find the interpreted form of primary sources of information. And that is how we get the secondary sources. You simply interpret the data, the raw facts, experimental data that has been contained in these primary sources, and we come up with the books, journals, and articles. So let's look at the next thing, which is now our second slide, and that is the purpose. What is the purpose of these primary sources? And what is the purpose of the secondary sources? As usual, we begin with the primary sources. Now, when you look at the primary source, the major aim of the primary source is to provide raw evidence. This raw evidence can be used to interpret and find meaningful facts that can be now revealed in the secondary sources. Then we have research foundation. It is after we have done experimental research, then the information and data that we get from the experiments from the laboratories are the ones that we can have experiment based data, and from that data we come up with conclusions that have meaningful information. Then direct connection, these ones connect us direct with what was there in the field. Then insight into the text, it gives you the overview of what you are doing. Then next, the purpose of the secondary sources. One, we have interpretation. This is where we interpret and come up with the conclusions. Two, broader understanding. When you just go to the field, maybe in the battlefield, you find out that there was war, but when you sit down and interpret it well, you realize that what was exactly in the war. Therefore, the primary source will tell you what was in the war, but the secondary source will tell you what exactly happened in the war. That is the purpose of the secondary sources. Let's look at our next thing. We have the role in research. What is the role of the primary source in research? When you look at the primary sources, one, they provide us with original data. Then when you look at the secondary sources, they provide us with primary sources. The secondary sources, they simply support the use of primary sources. Actually, they add more meaning to the primary sources. Then last, we have the time frame. When we look at the primary sources, these ones are actually things that occurred exactly, and therefore they are produced at the time of event. when did the thing exactly take place, and that is the exact time when that thing was also written. For example, maybe the war in China that took place at a particular time, that thing will have the reported speech, and that one will be revealed from the primary sources. Then the secondary sources, these ones, they are typically written after the event, after the thing has occurred. Now go and analyze the primary sources which have the raw data, you compile it, then now you now produce a book, a journal, an article analyzing what happened. So the secondary sources simply come after the event has occurred. So members, that is where I will end with the information sources for today's video. As we come next time, be prepared that there is more interesting chapters coming, and that is none other than the search strategies. You have the information literacy, you have the citations, you have the information sources, but now how do you look for this information? And that is what we call the search strategies. How do you search for information? So for today, let's end here. Next time when we meet, we shall see that. Thank you everyone. Bye.